My spoiled cousin was always the golden child, private school, handouts, and a job at my uncle's firm. At Thanksgiving, I dropped that I own a $25 million startup. He lost it. That's not real money. My uncle started screaming, and my mom whispered, "You were never meant to outshine him." So I stood up, pulled out my phone, and said, "Then let's truly ruin his night." My own mother whispered it to me, right there at the Thanksgiving table, "You were never supposed to outshine him." In that moment, the entire world I knew crumbled, setting me on a path of no return. The grand house, usually filled with laughter, fell silent around us. The smell of butter and garlic, rich and comforting moments before, now felt heavy, suffocating. I could feel every eye on us. I'm Ethan, 31, and against all odds, my startup just closed a $25 million funding round. It still feels unreal, especially coming from a family that always treated me like the backup option. You know, not the star athlete, not the valedictorian, just me. The quiet kid with average grades and low-key hobbies. I didn't exactly shine next to my cousin, Caleb. He was the walking embodiment of parental pride. If my life was a group photo, I'd be the blurry background, while Caleb's face would be in perfect focus, framed by metaphorical sparkles. His parents, my Uncle Patrick and Aunt Brenda, had money. Not yacht-level money, but enough for Caleb's private schools, piano lessons, fencing, and skiing trips every winter. Meanwhile, I got public school fish sticks and secondhand soccer cleats. It wasn't jealousy, not really. It was how everyone else treated him, like his wins were the family's wins, and the rest of us were just lucky to be nearby. My mom, bless her heart, worked 2 jobs without complaint. But I saw it in her eyes during those family gatherings, that silent apology for not being able to keep up. Caleb never asked for rides. He had his own car at 16. When he graduated from some overpriced New England school, Uncle Patrick gave him a job at his firm. No questions asked. Entry-level, title only. I once overheard Brenda bragging about him reviewing contracts and sitting in on high-level meetings within his first month. I didn't even get a job interview after college. I ended up freelancing in tech, building websites, taking whatever gigs I could find while renting a studio apartment the size of a parking space. For a long time, I swallowed it all. I kept my head down, worked hard, focused on what I could control. I got good, really good. I met brilliant people, and together, we built something amazing from scratch. We didn't seek media attention, and I never brought it up at family gatherings. I didn't need their approval. I didn't want the spotlight. But sometimes, the world has other plans. Thanksgiving had always been tolerable, a routine. My mom and I would show up with store-bought pies nobody touched. We'd sit through Uncle Patrick's long speeches about work ethic, usually ending with a toast to Caleb's latest promotion. I'd get the occasional, still doing computer stuff, from relatives who couldn't remember my job title. But this Thanksgiving felt different. My mom was quieter on the drive over. She kept adjusting her blouse, muttering. When I asked if she was okay, she gave me a tight smile and said, "Just brace yourself." I didn't press. The house was already full. Patrick's mansion, open floor plan, tall ceilings, echoing every step. People milled around with drinks. I recognized most faces, but a few kept glancing at me, whispering, curious. Like they knew something. I tried to ignore it. Then Caleb spotted me. He walked over with that trademark smirk, the one that made it seem like he was about to sell you a timeshare. Well, if it isn't my favorite second-string cousin," he said, clapping my back a little too hard. "Still working from home? Or did you finally join the real world?" "Still working," I replied, polite smile. "Things have been busy, right?" He winked. "Tech stuff, apps, crypto, whatever the kids are doing now." I shrugged. "Something like that." Before I could move on, Uncle Patrick sauntered over, whiskey in hand. "Ethan," he boomed. "Glad you could make it. Your mother said you've been doing all right." He said it like someone asking if your goldfish was still alive. I nodded. "Yeah, it's been a good year." Patrick chuckled. "Good to hear. You know, if you're ever looking for something more stable, Caleb could always use an assistant over at the firm. Great learning opportunity." I blinked. "Thanks, but I think I'm okay." Oh, come on, Caleb added, sipping his drink. We could get you a desk next to mine. You'd finally get to see what a real office looks like. My jaw clenched, but I kept my tone even. Appreciate it, but I'm not really looking for that kind of role. It was classic Caleb, offer a fake olive branch just to look generous. I was used to it. What I wasn't used to was my mom stepping forward, a gentle hand on my arm. Actually, she said softly, Ethan has had a big year. He's being modest. Patrick raised an eyebrow. Oh. My mom hesitated, then, his startup just raised $25 million. The air shifted instantly, like someone opened a window to a cold draft. Conversations dipped. Heads turned. Caleb blinked slowly, his smirk faltering. Patrick looked stunned, then forced a laugh. $25 million, he repeated. Like Monopoly money or real dollars? Real, I said quietly. From a few VCs and a strategic partner. Caleb scoffed. Come on. No offense, but that's not even real money. Those deals fall through all the time. Half of those startups crash and burn within a year. Patrick nodded. Exactly. It's not the same as a stable career, you know. Structure. Real clients. Benefits. You'll see. It's a bubble. Always is. I didn't respond. I just looked at them, then at my mom. Her face was flushed. She looked down at her hands, embarrassed. That's when she whispered it, barely loud enough for me to hear. You were never supposed to outshine him. I froze. She wasn't angry, not even bitter. She said it like a fact, like this was the natural order of things, and I had accidentally broken the rules. My chest tightened. All those years of being overlooked, talked down to, sidelined. It wasn't just me imagining things. It had been by design. I stood there, stunned, while Caleb poured himself another drink and laughed with his dad. My hands shook slightly, not from anger, but from something deeper. A betrayal I didn't realize I could feel. All I had ever done was stay in my lane, work hard, be quiet. And now that I had something to be proud of, it was met with condescension, dismissal, and that whispered confession from the one person I thought had always been in my corner. That's when something shifted in me. A small click, like a lock turning. I slowly pulled out my phone, turned the screen toward myself, and opened a folder I'd bookmarked for this exact moment. My voice was calm, almost too calm. Then let's really ruin his night. I didn't know exactly what I meant. The words just came out, quiet, pointed, deliberate. But even I wasn't sure what I was about to do. I wasn't angry in the traditional sense, not red-faced and boiling. No, this was colder. Like someone had flipped a switch inside me, and the years of quiet tolerance had finally run out. Nobody seemed to hear me except my mom, who gave me a confused glance, but said nothing. I pocketed my phone, plastered on a smile, and acted like nothing had happened. The rest of dinner moved in slow motion. The mahogany table was set like a magazine. Patrick, at the head, carved the turkey like a smug Roman emperor. Brenda complimented everything with a practiced tone. Caleb, in full performance mode, held court, recounting a story about negotiating a deal at his firm, leveraging synergy and upstream visibility. I tuned it out. I'd heard it all before, just different buzzwords. At one point, Caleb raised his glass, here's to family. And to learning from those of us who know how to succeed. There was a light chuckle, a social reflex. My mom fiddled with her napkin. My hand trembled reaching for my water. It wasn't the toast that got me. It was Caleb's smirk right after, the slight tilt of his head, daring me to respond. So I did. I actually had a funny call last week, I said casually. One of our investors is pushing us to expand into enterprise partnerships. They brought up licensing our back-end architecture to 3 major fintechs in Q1. Pretty wild. The table went quiet. Not because anyone understood what I was saying, but because I'd had the audacity to speak with authority in a space Caleb considered his territory. Caleb leaned forward, lips twitching. That's cute, he said. But that's not the same as a real acquisition. We're talking about valuation, not actual revenue. Your company might be worth $25 million on paper, but that's not money in your pocket. It's speculative. You could lose it all tomorrow. I nodded slowly. That's true. But we have 8-figure term sheets on the table, and I still own majority equity. So yeah, not exactly sweating. My uncle coughed into his hand. Let's not turn this into a pissing contest, all right? We're here to enjoy a meal. That would have been fine if it had ended there. But it didn't. Brenda chimed in, her voice thick with syrup. It's just so refreshing to see Caleb's stability, though. He's always been grounded. He didn't run off chasing some app dream or Austin tech scene fantasy. He stayed close to family, built something real. I blinked. Did you just? Patrick cut in quickly. You've done well for yourself, Ethan. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Startups crash every day. Yeah, Caleb added. And if they don't crash, they get bought and gutted. Either way, it's not sustainable. You're lucky you even got that far. It's not really repeatable. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't know how to explain that this wasn't luck. That I'd built something from the ground up, pulled all-nighters for years eating instant ramen and debugging code until my eyes burned. That I'd taken risks no one else in that room would ever have the guts to make. But I saw it on their faces. They didn't care. And that's when the real betrayal happened. Dessert, a pristine pecan pie, had just been brought out when Patrick cleared his throat and clinked his glass. I have an announcement, he said, standing. Brenda and I have been thinking a lot about legacy lately, about how to pass on not just wealth, but wisdom to the next generation. So, we've decided to bring Caleb into the company as a full partner. Effective January. There was polite applause. Cheers. Even my mom clapped weakly. But Patrick wasn't done. We're also restructuring some assets and shifting parts of the firm under his name. That includes the rental properties in Denver, the consulting arm, and the Lake Tahoe retreat. Wait, what? The Lake Tahoe retreat wasn't just some vacation spot. It was the one place that held good memories for me as a kid. My mom and I used to go there when Patrick let us borrow it during off-seasons. It was a modest A-frame cabin near the water. Nothing flashy, but it was ours for a few days each year. We'd play cards, cook, swim. It was the only place in the family where I didn't feel like I was borrowing air. Isn't that a bit much? I heard myself say. Patrick looked at me like I was a fly buzzing near his ear. Excuse me. The Tahoe property. You always said that was for the whole family, that it wasn't part of the business. Caleb smirked. Well, it is now. And I already have plans for it, to be honest. Probably a tear down. Might rebuild it into something modern. Throw some solar panels on it. My mom flinched. I looked at her, hoping, begging for her to say something. But she didn't. She just sat there, lips pressed tightly as if she'd already accepted it. As if she'd known. You can't be serious, I said, my voice rising. Patrick narrowed his eyes. Ethan, don't make a scene. This is a business decision. You wouldn't understand. You mean I wouldn't be allowed to understand? That's enough, he snapped. You should be grateful you were even invited tonight. That was it. The dam broke. Years of biting my tongue, of swallowing condescension and forced smiles and second-string cousin jokes. All of it came crashing down. I built a company from nothing, I said, standing. From nothing. No handouts, no family firm, no private school network. And you're telling me I wouldn't understand a business decision? You think giving your spoiled son a bundle of assets is wisdom? You're rewarding mediocrity because you're afraid of what real work looks like. Sit down, Patrick growled, before you embarrass yourself further. No, I said. You want to talk legacy? Let's talk legacy. You handed Caleb a career. You bought his success. I earned mine. There was stunned silence. Brenda reached for her wine. Then my mom, quiet, exhausted, and clearly cornered, said, Ethan, please don't. I turned to her. Why didn't you tell me? She didn't respond, just looked down. That hurt more than anything Patrick could have said. Caleb stood too. And for once, the smirk was gone. You're blowing this way out of proportion. If you're so rich, then buy your own lake house. No one cares. I felt my chest tighten. You don't get it, do you? It was never about the property. It was about what it represented. You already had everything, and now you're taking the last piece of anything that ever felt safe. Patrick tossed his napkin on the table. You're being dramatic. I pulled out my phone again. Same folder, same bookmarked file. You want to talk business? Fine. Let's talk business. I've been quiet out of respect, but maybe it's time I share a few details. Like the fact that our biggest investor, he used to be one of your clients until you dropped the ball and he came to me. Patrick's eyes widened. And maybe I should tell you what we're planning to launch in January. Because if you think the consulting arm you just gave to Caleb is safe from competition, well, let's just say you'll be seeing my name in your inbox soon, along with a few of your clients. My uncle went pale. Caleb looked between us, confused. Wait, what is this? I looked him in the eyes. This is what happens when you mistake silence for weakness. The room was dead quiet. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Somewhere, a fork clinked. And, just like that, the power dynamic in the room shifted. I could feel it, a weight lifting off my chest. Not because I had one, not yet, but because I had finally stopped playing their game. But the night wasn't over. The fallout was immediate. My mom didn't speak to me on the ride home. Her hands stayed clenched in her lap. When I tried to say something, she just gave that tired, empty look. Not now. I didn't press. We drove back to her place in silence. She went straight to her room. No hug, no, thank you for defending me, no, I'm proud of you. Just the soft closing of her door, like the credits to a scene I hadn't realized was over. I stood in her hallway for a long time, phone in hand, hoping she'd come back out. She didn't. The next morning, she was gone. A note on the counter. Needed space. No apology, no explanation. Need time. That one stung more than I wanted to admit. Because here's the thing. When you grow up as the quiet one, the overlooked one, your victories are always half sweet. You get used to winning quietly, clapping for yourself in empty rooms. That's fine when you choose that solitude. But when someone you love chooses it for you, when they look at your success and say, you were never supposed to have that, it carves something open in your chest that doesn't close so easily. Over the next week, the family group chat imploded. First, passive-aggressive. Brenda posted a Bible quote about humility. Uncle Patrick dropped a link to an article about startup arrogance. And Caleb sent me a private message that just said, hope it was worth it. I didn't reply. I told myself I was done with all of them. But deep down, I was spiraling. Couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Replaying that dinner, my mom's whisper, Patrick's smug face, Caleb's condescension. It didn't feel like justice. It felt hollow. I even second-guessed myself. Was I too harsh? Was I trying to prove something that didn't need proving? Was I becoming exactly the person they always accused me of being? I stopped checking the group chat, stopped answering texts. Even my co-founder, Sam, noticed. You good, man? He asked during a late-night Zoom call. I shrugged. Fine. He raised an eyebrow. You look like you haven't slept in a week. Thanksgiving was complicated. Family, he said. Yeah, they don't get it. They think all this, what we're building, is fake. Some bubble. I nodded. You want to know what my uncle said to me when we got our first funding round? Sam asked. What? Guess you're lucky some sucker believed in you. I cracked a smile. Sounds familiar. Sam leaned in. Let me tell you something. We're not lucky. We're resilient. Lucky people win lotteries. Resilient people grind for 10 years and get called lucky when it finally pays off. That hit harder than I expected. For a while, I'd started to forget that. I was so tangled in proving myself to people who never wanted to understand that I stopped seeing the people who already did. People like Sam, like our team, like our customers, real people who use what we built every single day. So, I turned off my phone. Gave myself 2 full days away from the noise. Then I got back to work. And something wild happened. For the first time in months, I started coding again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I locked myself in my apartment with coffee and a whiteboard, rewrote the back end of our core product, streamlined it, gave it new life. When I demoed it to the team, their eyes lit up. This is insane, one dev said. It runs twice as fast. Sam just grinned. Guess Ethan got his groove back. And that groove didn't stop. In the weeks that followed, we hit our first major profitability milestone. One of our beta clients turned into a full contract, then referred us to 3 others. The product that Patrick and Caleb had mocked as speculative was now bringing in more real revenue than their entire consulting arm. And the kicker? Our new lead investor, the one who dropped Patrick's firm a few years back, offered to host a private networking dinner in San Francisco with several of his VC contacts and wanted me to speak. That invitation sat in my inbox for days. Not because I didn't want it, but because I was still wrestling with that part of me. The kid who used to sit at the Thanksgiving table hoping for a scrap of recognition. The one who still wondered if success mattered if no one clapped for it. But the truth is, people were clapping now. Just not the ones I'd been performing for. Around that same time, I got a text from my mom. "Can we talk? I've been thinking a lot." I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to protect the peace I'd finally started to rebuild. But another part of me still missed her. Still wanted her to understand. We met at a diner 2 towns over. Neutral ground, middle of the afternoon. She was already there, hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. I wasn't sure either. We sat in silence. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "For what I said at Thanksgiving." I didn't say anything. She kept going. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. I've spent so many years keeping the peace, playing nice, watching Patrick and Brenda take up all the space. I thought if I kept my head down, you'd be left alone. I didn't expect you to shine." Her voice cracked. "I didn't expect it," she said again. "But I should have." That did something to me. It didn't fix everything, not right away, but it opened a door. "Why didn't you say anything when they gave Caleb the lake house?" I asked. She looked down. "Because I already knew it was gone. Patrick told me a month earlier. I didn't want to ruin the holiday." "You think pretending everything's fine makes things better?" "No," she whispered. I think I was scared. We sat there for a while. 2 people who had been surviving so long we'd forgotten what it felt like to just feel. Finally, I said, "They don't get to write the story anymore. You know that, right?" She nodded. "You built something from nothing," she said softly. I should have said it sooner, but I see it now. I left the diner with a lighter chest. It wasn't a full reconciliation. Not yet, but it was a start. And sometimes, that's enough. Over the next month, things kept moving. We secured another round of funding. Hired new staff. And that San Francisco dinner? I went. I stood in a room full of venture capitalists and CEOs and told the story of how we built our product in a rented garage with nothing but laptops and caffeine. I talked about resilience, failure, being overlooked. When I finished, someone called out, "So, what's next?" I smiled. "Next," I said, "we show the people who doubted us what real growth looks like." There was a standing ovation. As I flew back home that night, I opened a document I'd been slowly piecing together. It wasn't a business plan. It wasn't an investor pitch. It was a different kind of plan, one that would change everything for Patrick and Caleb. Because while they thought the Lake Tahoe retreat was just a cabin, just some aging property to tear down, I had discovered something about it, something that wasn't in the papers they signed. A loophole. An opportunity. And a chance to deliver the kind of lesson that money can't buy. But that's where the real revenge begins. I didn't start out wanting revenge. After Thanksgiving, I just wanted distance. Mental, emotional, physical. I deleted the family group chat. Stopped answering calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I went ghost. For a while, it worked. Life was quieter, clearer. But the more I settled into that silence, the more I realized something. It wasn't over. Not for me. Not for the part of me that still heard Caleb's smug voice in my sleep, or the way my mom's whisper had sliced through the air like it was always meant to hurt. I had moved on, sure, but they hadn't. I knew their type. They'd rewrite what happened. They'd turn me into the villain of the Thanksgiving table, a bitter outburst from the jealous cousin who couldn't handle success the right way. And that narrative would stick because they were the ones with the spotlight, with the Christmas cards and family reunions and group chats I'd been unofficially erased from. So, I decided I wasn't just going to move on. I was going to rewrite the narrative. And that started with the cabin, Lake Tahoe. It was more than a symbol. It was my childhood. One of the only places I ever felt safe. Not because of who owned it, but because it was quiet, peaceful. Mine and my mom's. We used to call it the reset button. Whenever things got too hard, we'd drive up, bring books, play board games, just exist without interruption. The idea that Caleb, of all people, was planning to bulldoze it into some soulless abomination lit something inside me I hadn't felt in years. Not rage. Something sharper, resolve. So, I went digging. At first, I just wanted to know when the transfer happened, who signed what. But as I pulled property records, digging through archived deeds and tax documents, something didn't add up. The property had been transferred to Patrick's firm a few years ago, but the land rights were still held in a dormant family trust from the 1980s. My grandfather's name was still listed as the grantor, and the trust hadn't been fully dissolved. That might sound like a technicality, but in legal terms, that's gold. Because while the structure on the land now belonged to the firm and, therefore, to Caleb, the actual dirt it sat on was still technically under the oversight of the trust. And guess who was named as a secondary beneficiary on that trust? Me. I stared at the scanned document for a long time, not even breathing. It was like watching a ghost from the past rise up with a hand on my shoulder, saying, "You're not done here yet." I immediately called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. Chloe, an old college friend turned real estate attorney who owed me a favor from when I helped her firm rebuild their client portal after a ransomware scare. "Chloe," I said, "I have something weird, but I think it might be real." She took one look at the documents I emailed and called me back within 10 minutes. "Ethan, you're sitting on leverage." I thought so. How strong? Strong enough that if they try to develop, you could legally block construction. What about kicking them off the land? Trickier. You'd need to activate your claim through the trust and prove misuse or abandonment. But it's doable. That was all I needed. Now, the question wasn't if I'd act, it was how. I didn't want to walk into court guns blazing. That wasn't my style. It would only give them ammo to spin the story. Ethan is bitter, trying to steal property from Caleb after his Thanksgiving tantrum. No. This had to be subtle, strategic. I had to let them walk into the trap on their own. So, I waited. And while I waited, I started gathering intel. First, I hired a local photographer who lived near the lake, a hobbyist I found through a Tahoe neighborhood Facebook group. I told her I was documenting changes to the property for a family archive. She agreed, no questions asked. Over the next 2 weeks, she sent weekly photos of the cabin. The first batch looked normal, quiet, untouched. The second batch, a dumpster appeared in the driveway. Then scaffolding. Then a sign for a construction firm. Perfect. They were starting renovations. And based on the photos, they hadn't even filed the required notice with the township's historical committee, a group I'd learned had jurisdiction over certain lakeside properties, especially older ones. So, I made a few phone calls. One to the local zoning board, another to the historical committee, then one more to a local reporter who ran a tiny blog covering Tahoe property disputes. Within a week, an official stop work order was posted on the cabin door. But that was just the appetizer. I needed something more theatrical. Something poetic. So, I went back to the trust. Chloe helped me file a formal motion to reopen and review the trust usage clause, something that hadn't been touched in decades. It triggered an automatic 60-day review period, which legally froze any long-term development or sale of the land. Patrick received the letter at his office. That's when the call started. First, him, voicemail. Then Aunt Brenda. Then Caleb. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I booked a meeting room in downtown Dallas, reserved under a neutral LLC name. I had Chloe join me, along with my firm's legal advisor, just to watch the fireworks. Then I sent one simple email to Patrick's office. "You have questions? I have the land. Let's talk." They arrived in suits. Tired eyes, tension crackling off them like static. Patrick tried to take control immediately. "This is absurd, Ethan. You're holding up an entire development plan over semantics. We own that property." "You own the building," I replied calmly. "Not the soil it's built on." Caleb scoffed. "This is ridiculous." Chloe leaned forward. "What's ridiculous is beginning construction without proper title clarity or zoning board approval. You've made several procedural errors which my client is under no obligation to overlook. Patrick's face was red. What do you want? I didn't answer right away. I looked at them. 3 people who had belittled me for years, who had taken and taken, assuming I'd never fight back. Who thought I'd disappear into the footnotes of their success stories. And then I said, I want you to realize you never own me. Patrick blinked. What? This isn't about the cabin. It's not even about the land. It's about every table I wasn't welcome at. Every time you tried to shrink me so your son could feel bigger. Every whispered joke. Every backhanded compliment. I stopped chasing your approval a long time ago. But now you need mine. The silence in the room was heavy. So, you're doing this out of spite? Brenda asked. No, I said. I'm doing this because I finally can. And then I slid the folder across the table. Inside were 2 options. Option 1. I retain partial control of the land through the trust and allow seasonal access with written permission. No construction, no sale, no teardown. The cabin stays intact. A line drawn in the sand. Option 2. I buy out the firm's stake in the cabin entirely. Full ownership reverts to me. The land, the structure, everything. Market value plus 15%. Cash. They looked at each other. They didn't like either option, but they understood the implication. They no longer held the pen. I did. They left without signing. I knew they'd drag it out. Try to counter. But the clock was ticking and the law was on my side. And in the meantime, I had something even better in motion because the San Francisco investor dinner had led to a second dinner and a third. And then a casual lunch with a former executive from one of Patrick's top consulting clients. He didn't like Patrick. Said he always found him arrogant. I smiled because I knew exactly what I was going to do with that. But that's the next chapter. I waited 2 weeks after that meeting, just long enough for the silence to become unbearable. Caleb sent me a 1-line email asking if I was done being dramatic. I didn't respond. Patrick called my mom twice, hoping she could talk some sense into me, but she didn't pick up. She'd stopped defending him after the diner. After years of biting her tongue, she had finally started to see what I had lived with all my life. But the revenge itself, it wasn't about theatrics. It wasn't about one big speech or grandstanding in a courtroom. That's not how power works. True power is quieter, strategic, patient. It happens in rooms your enemies never get invited to until it's too late. And I was in those rooms now. It started with a simple lunch in San Francisco. The former executive, David, was in his 50s, sharp and surprisingly honest for someone who used to be CFO of a company worth $500 million. He'd left that role a year ago after a merger and was now doing advisory work and angel investing. You said you used to work with Patrick's firm? I asked over coffee. He smirked briefly. Overpriced and underwhelming. They coast on old contracts and family name. I told my CEO at the time it was a waste of budget. That was all the confirmation I needed. I'm building a new arm inside our company, I said. Enterprise consulting, SaaS implementation, AI migration, pipeline analysis, high-level advisory. We need a flagship client. He raised an eyebrow. You offering me a job? Offering you equity, I said, sliding a term sheet across the table. If you can bring in your old contacts and help close one of Patrick's top 3 clients, I'll match your old stock payout and give you full C-suite title in the new division. He glanced at the numbers and gave a low whistle. You're serious? Deadly. He chuckled, then extended a hand. Let's bury them. Within a month, David had done exactly what I hoped he would. He got in touch with a mid-sized financial services firm that Patrick's consultancy had handled for years, a juicy contract worth around $800,000 annually, mostly for compliance, support, and implementation. Patrick's team had been coasting, copy-paste solutions, no customization. The client was dissatisfied, but too lazy to move, until David reminded them what innovation looked like. I didn't even need to pitch. David did the talking. I just sat in the room, nodded where necessary, and let the product speak for itself. The client signed a 3-year deal with us. $1.5 million guaranteed, with performance bonuses stacked on top. That same day, Patrick's firm got the termination letter. But I wasn't done. Remember the Lake Tahoe cabin? The one they tried to gut and rebuild into a soulless McMansion? They kept dragging their feet, trying to stall the land review, hoping I'd back down. So, I hit them from another angle. I had quietly contacted the Lake Tahoe Historical Preservation Committee a few weeks earlier. Turns out the cabin, my grandfather's cabin, was eligible for historical landmark status. It had original timber from the 1940s, a preserved layout, and even handwritten notes from my grandfather's architectural sketchpad nailed into the crawl space, still intact. Chloe and I filed the preservation request. We added photos, family letters, receipts, even a photo of me and my mom from 1998, sitting on the porch, eating grilled cheese. The board reviewed it, approved it. And just like that, the cabin was untouchable. No renovations, no bulldozers, no future sale without state-level oversight. Caleb's modern teardown plans vaporized. They received the notification via certified mail. Patrick apparently called the committee to protest. They told him it was out of their hands. It all came to a head at another family dinner. Not Thanksgiving this time, Easter. Smaller crowd, just a few cousins, a ham on the table, and a very awkward atmosphere. Patrick wasn't talking. Caleb showed up late, already fuming. I knew why. Word had finally gotten back to them that I'd poached 2 more of their long-term clients, that our new consulting division had overtaken theirs in quarterly earnings, that I was now considered a preferred vendor for a dozen clients they used to own. He pulled me aside before dessert. "You think this proves something?" he hissed. I didn't answer. "You think you're better than me now? You stole from us." "I didn't steal," I said calmly. "I competed. And I won." He stepped closer. "You're still a joke." "You always were." I smiled, slow and easy. "Then why do you keep losing to me?" He opened his mouth, closed it, walked away without another word. Patrick left shortly after. No goodbye. Just the sound of the door closing harder than necessary. In the weeks that followed, things unraveled fast. Patrick's firm lost another contract. This one was with a startup in the Pacific Northwest that Sam personally handled. Our tools ran better. Our support team responded faster. And unlike Patrick's firm, we didn't treat young clients like they were disposable. I heard through the grapevine that they laid off 6 people. Caleb wasn't one of them, but his role was quietly adjusted. No longer a partner, now just senior consultant. Meanwhile, the Lake Tahoe cabin. I took full control of it after they agreed begrudgingly to sell their interest back to the trust. I paid the market rate. No tricks, just numbers, fair and final. The day the papers were signed, I drove up with my mom. She hadn't been there in almost a decade. We sat on the porch with 2 mugs of tea and watched the sun go down. The lake shimmered gold. The air smelled like pine and old memories. "They really thought you'd just roll over," she said quietly. "They always did," I replied. She looked at me. "You didn't just prove them wrong. You did it without turning into them." That was the part one was proudest of. Because I never stooped. I never slandered. I never yelled or schemed. I just used what I had, my mind, my work, my integrity. And let that speak for itself. And when it finally spoke, it roared. About a month later, I got a final email from Caleb. "You got what you wanted. Enjoy the cabin. You'll always be a parasite." I didn't reply. Didn't need to. Because a week later, I posted a photo to my social media. It was the front porch of the cabin, my laptop on the table, a coffee mug beside it. The caption read, "Build something real." No handouts, no apologies, just peace. The post went viral in my little circle. Not because it was flashy, but because it was honest. And if Patrick or Caleb saw it, good. They deserved to know what peace looked like after everything they tried to take. And now I don't think about them much. The cabin's quiet again. My company's growing, and my mom and I are closer than ever. She comes up once a month, brings pie, reads on the porch, and reminds me that we made it. Not because someone handed us power, but because we earned it. Every inch, every scar, every silence. They tried to write me out of the story, so I wrote my own ending. And this time, they don't get a single page. What would you have done in my shoes?